Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Athena. I am the Executive Director for CPTSD Foundation, the Foundation for Post-Traumatic Healing and Complex Trauma Research. And I have the privilege of interviewing and bringing to you today Dr. Jamie Huysman for this free workshop that he has so generously offered on how you know if you are in or have just exited a toxic or abusive relationship. This workshop is called Have You Stepped in Tar? So just to give you a little bit of information about Dr. Jamie Huysman is a licensed clinical social worker, certified trauma therapist, and best-selling author who understands the power of the media and the positive effects that the media the effects that the media can have to make positive change, to affect positive change in the world. So Dr. Jamie, you may recognize him. He is renowned for pioneering TV aftercare program, which launched in the early 90s. And that launched on 12 different daytime television shows. So he revolutionized the daytime television climate by offering clinical and corrective support, extending over $8 million in pro bono healthcare services to more than 800 participants. So he makes sense out of all things psychological and mental health related, and he is a heart-centered entrepreneur, and he's a best-selling author, and I just can't wait to introduce you to him and invite him to share more about the projects he's working on and how you can access the care that you so deserve if you're dealing with toxic and abusive relationships. Warm welcome to you, Dr. Jamie. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom with us today on this free workshop.
Athena, I've been looking very much forward to it. EOS is a continuum of care, right? Our 501c3 being about awareness. And as Freud says, once you're aware, you're no longer naive. Guess what? You have to transform. And I see your organization as transformation. And so being able to speak to you and have this interview and this day, especially with your listeners, it's something I've looked forward to. So thank you for having us.
Oh, you are so welcome. I don't want to interrupt our flow or anything, but I really want to just invite everybody to whatever they're doing right now, click pause on this free workshop. And if you're on Instagram or if you're a fan of the IG or a fan of the gram, go follow Dr. Jamie. Look for TAR Networks on Instagram, TAR Network. And I think you have about 60,000 Instagram followers at this point. Do you not?
We do, Athena. That's a good thing, and that's not such a good thing, right? If we view this as the greatest public health disaster, the attachment disorder, and that's what TAR Network is really dedicated to, both the support of those going through narcissistic abuse, the education of parents not to create these particular people, and the treatment of them. It's encouraging there's 60,000 people in 3 months, but it's discouraging that there's so many people that are survivors also looking for direction. But we're very grateful that, yes, there's about 60,000. We'd love for everybody to come aboard. And I give it to my daughter. Everybody should know I'm an AARP daddy, and that my daughter's 12 years old, and she takes it to school and through its animation, by the way, and the ideas. And I love the ideas of your listeners. I always love yours and the CPTSD Foundation, but it's animation because I learned years ago in TV, they say, cut the psychobabble, Jamie. You're talking to 6 million people. So we try to do that now through street talk, relatable things, and animation. So thank you for mentioning that. We'd love for everybody to be following it.
Wonderful. Well, I do enjoy what you are doing over on your Instagram grid, and I think there is something to be said about a character on a screen that is so sweet and so precious and so cute, and yet they're dealing with something so painful, and the juxtaposition of the sweetness and the cuteness and the pain that you can tell that this little character is experiencing. For me personally, when I see something like that in the way that you all present it, it helps me have compassion for that younger little part of me that didn't have the attuned primary caregiver. There was that attunement, there was the misattunement, and then there was the dysregulation, and rarely, if ever, was there the repair. And so I think it's just, it's interesting and also very accessible for anyone who struggles with inner child work or struggles with early childhood wounding. So can you tell us a little bit more about everything you're doing at TAR Network and the different projects that you're working on?
I'd love to, and thank you for that opportunity. And you're correct about the other piece, and I see that in the kids today. And we have a teens and tweens section that we cover Olivia Rodrigo and Taylor Swift, and they give us fabulous paths to complex trauma, really, in how early it actually develops in a child, right? So I do believe this is the greatest public health disaster, and I've listened. I appreciate that intro. It's really powerful, and it kind of makes me kind of feel, I mean, deeply grateful, but also really humble in the sense that it's long. And I think this is the way best to know people as opposed to anything else. So I will say this, I, as a clinician, I've been trained for 33 years now. My first clinical degree was many, many years ago, I think in the 80s when I became a social worker. And I know the DSM-5 pretty well. I know psychopathology pretty well. I taught it in college. I love group therapy. I fabulously love Yalom's work, and I taught group therapy for years. But I think the most important thing is that no matter how much you know, and I say this to my clients, you can't read yourself into recovery. You cannot. You have to go there experientially. And the hell was that after 20 some years of codependency recovery, because I got into codependency recovery many years ago, it still happened to me that my knees hit the ground when I met somebody and many years ago. And when it did, I was in a cognitive fog. I was gaslit. I totally went into this absolute vortex, isolated vortex of being with a toxic abusive person. And to your point, later on in my recovery from complex PTSD, I had to have compassion for them. I don't think any child wants to be evil. And this is a continuum of adverse childhood experiences and complex PTSD. The toxic partner is as much CPTSD driven as I was, except their 5 indicators are greater on the psychopathological scale that makes the diagnosis of a cluster B, right? And for the listeners, I don't want to get too deep in that weeds, but it's narcissistic personality disorder, borderline, histrionic, and antisocial. So I thought I knew all this, and yet I knew nothing. How's that? Until it hit me. And when it hit me, and I started coming out of the fog, and it was really realizing that codependency was also a dissociative state, like most addictions to childhood trauma. It was that I never got in touch with my CPTSD, why I was there, why I would go through this. And then when I finally got into recovery, I realized that my codependency treatment or even recovery was a trauma response, right? Fight, flight, freeze. And I was the fawner. And fawn and codependency, I think it got really tangled up. So that's how it happened. And I had run a charity for 12 years called the Lisa Gibbons Memory Foundation on my last TV show. Knew how to do it, and somehow it was weaponized, all my skills now, if you will, to come back and try to pay it forward. Because I figured if it happened to me after all those years, Athena, it's probably torturing people all around the world. And I started noticing the attachment disorder in men and women and work sites, because I'm chief compassion officer at WellMed Medical, so I work with work sites. I started seeing this terrible common denominator. And the APA will say 1 out of 8 has maybe an attachment disorder, and they impact maybe almost 200 million people in America alone, whether it's the worksite men or women. So I realized this was a huge public health disaster. And I'll be quiet, but I'll tell you, if you don't believe that, all you need to do is look at Russia right now with a malignant narcissist with his hand on the bomb and tell me that the cluster B of the attachment disorder isn't the worst health disaster, and that we're not mindful of how not to create these people.
Can I back up just a little bit and
Please.
ask you a question? So
Anything.
what struck me most about what you were sharing is that you are not a newcomer to the idea of or the possibility of a toxic or abusive relationship, because your clinical background suggests that cognitively, even you mentioned cognitively, you had a knowledge of this. So would you say that, is it fair to say that old adage or that saying is like the the farthest distance ever is the from here to here. Like we can know something cognitively, but until we like experience it for ourselves, all of a sudden it's like you don't know you're in it until you're already in it. And there's something so demoralizing about that. We can shame the crap out of ourselves because we're like, I help people with this for a living. How did I end up here? And then we have this shame upon shame upon shame that gets piled on us. And I might be getting a little ahead of our conversation, but
Mhm.
I love the solutions that you have come up with. I love the solution-minded nature of the way that you've chosen to use your particular skill set. Like, can we talk about Taranon? Can we talk about the Tar Dojo and how we're equipping parents? And can we talk, what even is Tar? Like, let's just like, have you stepped in Tar is the title of this workshop. And from someone who spent 30 years in California, I know that when you walk the beach, you step in tar. But for the rest of the 49 states that might not have the La Brea tar pits, can you share with everyone what does that even mean? Have you stepped in tar?
Well, I love the fact that you referred to the bird tar pits because when I was years ago at Paramount Lisa, I used to go through there and not know about tar. This is an invention in some ways, and so I'm so glad you asked. And by the way, to precede that, just so you know, the doctors I work with, and I work with physicians as my clients now for their burnout. I always say exactly what you just said, that the longest trip you ever take is from your head to your heart. And the goddess of victory, Nike, says, do it. Let's just do it. That's their slogan, right? Because you have to go there. And so when I went there years ago, and I'll just make her name is Joanne years ago, and I met this person, I realized that TAR, toxic abuse relationship, I needed to use as a metaphor because nobody wanted to get into the histrionic, antisocial, borderline. Who does that? It's like a psychobabble. Why would anybody put up with emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse, right? Why would we ever be there? The
Why don't you
TAR,
just leave? Why'd you stay? It's like, could you victim shame just a little bit more?
you're so right. Why don't you do that? That toxic positivity blows my mind all the time. Everybody going in there, oh, it's that easy. Well, the trauma bond is not that easy. It became an addiction. And anybody who wants to know the definition of addiction is to do any behavior at all despite adverse consequences. So that trauma bond, that Stockholm syndrome that we came to became an addiction. So what you say about tar, I needed a way to language all this. And tar, like you said, the Labrador tar pits, but people don't know if you step in tar, it's all sticky. Once you put your hand on it, your hand stays. Once you put your foot on it, your foot stays. Eventually, you don't even know. And that corresponds with the love bombing and then getting into the relationship and then getting the accolades and then getting the discard and then getting all that. It becomes tar and you
Don't
can't
forget
even
the
get it off you.
Hoover. And then there's
Oh,
the Hoover.
and then the hoovering, right? That hoovering, because we're dealing with two separate things, right? We're dealing, I think, and again, I think the codependency, don't get me wrong, because I'm in recovery for it, maybe just as manipulative sometimes as the Axis too. However, I would say in recovery, and then if I don't do what I need to do tomorrow for my codependency recovery or my CPTSD, I could become it yesterday. So nobody here should think I'm a Buddha. We're all just human beings, not human doings. But I kind of believe that tar for me became something like the TV shows when Geraldo or Montel or Lisa kept screaming, cut the psychobabble. I said, how do I language this? How do we language it? So we started with Partners in Men's Health, which was 3.5 years ago, or maybe almost 4. And I didn't want it to be a He Too movement, even though I found no services whatsoever for men, no groups, nothing like that. So I started working in that world with cops and firemen because I'm a trauma therapist with their burnout and compassion fatigue, vicarious traumatization. And then I realized that 80% of my clients were women anyway, because they're more astute, more in tune with the affect. So we said, what are we going to do? Let's call it TAR. So the TAR network was in a vision of mine. And when I met Mila 3.5 years ago, of hers and my whole founding team of how do we language this properly? And when you see the attachment disorder, if you go to tarnetwork.org, it's pretty clear. We're talking about the men, the women, the caregivers, the work sites, the teens and tweens. Everywhere we see this attachment disorder either budding or actually, in full manifestation. So we deal with every population. And there was 3 things, and I'll be quiet now, 3 things we said we were going to do, period, and replace. And I always look for gaps in services in the world. And the first gap was there was no complex PTSD treatment center. Oh, yes. And many people had brochures and put it there and said it. But really, when you went in there, there weren't anything like it. I had patients going AMA, against medical advice, all the time, leaving. So here in Fort Lauderdale now, we're developing Oasis on Las Olas, which is our complex PTSD center, and it'll be open in about 7 months after it gets all its licensing. And then my other dream was Tar-Anon, which was Toxic Abusive Relationship Anonymous, because when you go into an AA or NA or CODA meeting, nobody understands this surrealistic hell of, oh my God, my kids won't talk to me. Oh my God, I'm getting destroyed. My cognitive fog, I lost my job. Everything's falling apart. So I figured we need an anonymous group, just have a free, accessible, anonymous group online and in person. And then finally, I said it wasn't fair to my child or the children of the future if we didn't try to solution for why are these people raising attachment disorder kids. And if you look at the Chumbley case in Michigan, where they got 15 years for parenting a school shooter, finally parenting is on the line here and needs to be accountable. And so what we want to do is develop a TAR dojo in many different educational ways, but this one's our neuro parenting program, which we're going to be scaling around the country. So 3 things: treatment, support, which is Tar-Anon, and prevention, which will be the TAR dojo.
I love that. That's a perfect trifecta. So treatment, prevention, and support. So treatment being Oasis, your the center located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and then prevention, Tar Dojo, which is helping equip parents to be more attuned to their child from a very young age, perhaps starting in utero. And then support, which is a free anonymous group every single Monday. And I think it's every single Monday. Did I misspeak?
Yeah, well, you didn't speak it. That's already lofty and ambitious. But guess what? I didn't want to create another AA or NA because I know those programs and they're fabulous. Bill and Bob, who created them, did emotional regulation and co-regulation quite well. But I wanted to get science involved. So Sandra Brown. I went back and looked at Purdue studies for narcissistic abuse, and she's done it for 30 years. So I have her and I writing the program together for Tar-Anon. It's not simply AA. It's actually you're right. We have Mondays for everybody, but we have now men meetings and women meetings also throughout the week, which is really what Tar-Anon, with steps, promises, and everything. We're also training what's called TAR mentors, which are literally our sponsors, which people with at least 3 to 5 years of recovery and complex PTSD, so that when we open up meetings, they can redirect, so it doesn't become this session of I hate this girl, or I hate this guy, or I hate this person, or this, that, and it can be redirected back to our own emotional regulation. Because Athena, better than anybody, the first toxic relationship we really have, well, I hate to say it's probably our parenting and our child years ago, but it's also today ourselves. And if we're not putting that ring on our finger, and if we're not, getting the greatest revenge, which is healing our own lives, then we're probably missing the boat. So that's what it's for. And we're going to be working steps, promises, because a lot of people can't afford treatment, right? Athena, I've run treatment centers for years. And all the money that we get we're a 501c3 like yours. So all the money and profits we get from the Oasis will go back into a scholarship fund for those people who can't afford it. Because I didn't, at this stage in my life, want to only treat the 1%ers anymore. I just needed to know this was vast, pandemic, and I wanted my cops, firemen, emergency medical technicians to have the same access as people who could afford it.
I love this. I love the vision. I love the mission. I love the values that you stand by. And I think the level of accessibility is remarkable, and it's worth mentioning. So where can I have a screen share of the Tar-Anon that I wanted to show everyone. And then I want to invite you to tell everybody how they can join you, where they can find more information. Okay?
Super. I'd be happy.
How does that sound?
Perfect.
Okay, here we go. So this is a Tar-Anon group, and I'll let you go ahead and invite everyone and tell them more about what they can expect is this in person? Is it virtual? How can people access this free support that you are offering them?
Well, I love it. I know this isn't a commercial for your organization or ours, but we're both charities and foundations trying to get by. I will say this, and please, your services at the CPTSD Foundation were inspirational for us because I found them to be affordable, right on target as we reparent our brain. You know, I'm on the Polyvagal Advisory Board, and I'm grateful to be on your advisory board. But as we reparent our brain, and this is going to be Tar-Non in totally neuroregulated sort of setting, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that kind of your services kind of inspired a lot of this too, because we'll be on a full-on continuum. So those who can't read, I'm so glad, Athena, you're such a great producer, that this is up there, because it is exactly what it says. It's a safe, non-judgmental, and anonymous worldwide program. I've actually been in contact over the past months as we've grown this or developed it. Just want everybody to know currently, just a level set. We're trying this out on intherooms.com, which is a website with about 1.3 million people in 20 countries. And we've been trying it out for the past year and watching people resonate to the concept of Tar-Non. There, it's been kind of a petri dish. And now we've branched out to do it clinically correct with men and women's groups. But it totally is a safe and non-judgmental. The greatest sin, I think, of behavioral health is that we haven't been accessible, that we created shame and stigma and dunk the drunk sort of stuff, and people didn't access it because they were kind of concerned. Well, because of what I'm sure you found out and what I found out, when we start talking about this, toxic abusive relationships, wow, whether it's you and your partner, whether it's you and your mom or dad, or whether it's you and your uncle or work site, people are free to talk about this. And in Tar-Non, for me, it was the safe and non-judgmental place. It was a place where people could come in a neuroregulated way, finally start the process of recovery from complex PTSD. Literally, that's what I'll say to everybody as a clinician. The key, the way out, is to lean in. And when you lean into your hell and cognitive fog and psychological war to go find yourself, which I had never really done, that is the way. And that's why I think your services of the CPTSD Foundation are critical. That is why a free, accessible support group, by the way, you said, I hope it's in person. We're going to try to fan out to churches, ashrams, synagogues, everywhere. Bob did with AA. Just so you know the reach of it, I was speaking to a psychiatrist from the Middle East, from the Gaza Strip. He said, "Oh my gosh, we'd love to do something like that." And I said, "Well, you could probably do it better than I can, doctor, because you're from the Islamic religion and it's Ramadan, and they'll listen to you more." He says, "Well, this would be great." And in Ireland and England, we have organizations that are starting also their Tar-Non, these non-judgmental places. So until we have them stand out like a AA meeting on your where and when, you can go online. On May 1st, we'll be launching the website right there, hopefully in tandem with you at the CPTSD Foundation. And then people become online to our site, and they'll be able to get the intro, which you mentioned, on Mondays, just to find out they're in the right place. And then we'll refer them to the next two groups, the men and the women's group afterwards, so they can get on their way to recovery in a very scientific but spiritual manner.
I love this. So I love that you're at the intersection of scientific approach and a spiritual approach, because so many, what I've noticed in the community is so many people are either healing from being cut off from their feelings because they've been so literal and scientific about how to approach their healing journey, and they're all up here, or they're also this other subset of healing from certain levels of religious abuse and spiritual abuse. And so the fact that you're kind of marrying the two and you're making it accessible to anyone regardless of what they're healing from, that is that's interesting, and I'm excited to see what you guys are going to do with that. I have a question. It's $1 million question. How do I know if I've stepped into, like, that's the question, right? Like, that's the workshop today. Have you stepped in tar? What are some things, if someone's here and they're watching right now or they're listening to this, they might have an inkling, or they might have a suspicion, or they might have a curiosity that there could be something that doesn't feel quite right. Something just feels off about this relationship. But how do you know if you've stepped in tar? What are some things, what are some aspects of, what are some bullet points if we have our note takers here? Because so many of our community members are so astute, and they're just like, I'm going to learn everything so I can heal this week.
That's like my doctors, right? I send them off to treatment now. They don't have CPTSD treatment. They'll go to codependency treatment. and they'll come back brilliant. They'll come back like Bessel van der Kolk or Gabor Mate. And I say to him, I said, that's great, but you got to go here. You can't just go here, right?
So
So
how do you know
here's
that they
simple as
can look
possible.
there?
I'm sorry. I'll get it simple as possible. Here's the game. Guess what? If it feels too good to be true, it probably is. How's that? That's the first thing I'll say to your listeners and people who might be watching. Because at the end of the day, toxic abusive relationships sometimes fit us like a glove. So what does it mean? We feel comfortable in the glove, right? It feels right. I often say at my company at WellMed Optum United, I'm dealing with basically 10-year-olds who might be 40, 50, 60-year-olds. And because I'm saying that, it's not negative, but most people haven't sought out treatment. Most people haven't sought out complex PTSD directions like your organization or ours. And so we say in psychology, we're doomed to recreate our dramas and traumas until we intervene on them. So you can bet your bottom dollar if you grew up in a household, and now I'm not blaming all the parents out there because I'm sure they parent, and my daughter's going to enjoy her time with her therapist too to try to deal with all the innocent quote unquote abuses that he's going to figure out because it happens. My parents read, Spock, Dr. Spock. I think he should be locked up in jail after I read that book. It's the most heinous book of childhood abuse I ever saw, but they didn't know what they were doing. So that too. But I must tell you, if it fits you like a glove, it probably is. The first thing I would say is if you meet somebody, obviously, and love bombing happens and you just becomes your soulmate in about, 30, 60 days of time. And I love you and I can't do without you and you just are perfect. Guess what? That's probably too fast, too quick. The love bombing side is real on this. They become your soulmate because why? Well, they know it. Listen, again, I have deep compassion for them. However, the attachment disorder is created between 4 and 8. And I often say we kind of become who we are in our first 10 years of our life. And it takes us the next 70 years to get out of it. So we take that neuro kind of tattoos of our parents with these innocent abuses, if you will, and things that happen, not so innocent. I mean, I testify in court for the not so innocent, but they become part of us. And so it fits us like a glove. So if somebody there love bombs you, go nuts, it's too good to be true, that's number one. Number two, R is the dark triad of 3 sort of characteristics. One is no empathy, no accountability, and kind of Machiavellian or transactional in nature. So you might be dealing on that love, I love you, but by the way, you need to look at that because that could be the childhood love. It could be the mirage, I call it. That's why we call our treatment center Oasis, the mirage of childhood. But you have to understand they're dealing with more of a, because it's clinical, more of a supply issue, more of a transactional issue. They grew up without a primary caregiver really loving them, showing them emotions. They grew up in, I call it kill or be killed mentality at young age. They kind of default, unfortunately, to the TAR, to no empathy, no accountability, and transactional. So it fits it like a glove. If it fits you as a listener, a viewer like a glove, and you start seeing that lack of empathy, somebody can't bear witness and have compassion for your energy or what's going on, or they're kind of transactional, or listen, let's face it, they're not accountable. They say it's not my problem. Relationships, as you know, Athena, are 50-50. And where burnout happens is when one person works harder than the other. So if you can't have that interchange between 2 people, one can't take ownership, guess what? You're starting to go down the road of TAR. Now, I'm not talking necessarily psychopathological. We're all in the continuum. I own it, the anxious avoidant or secure attachment style. We all came from that continuum. And I'm the avoidant one. So I'm in therapy every Tuesday with my therapist, who's Peter Levine, kind of Peter somatic therapy with her. But those who have 5 indicators or greater, then that person probably is dealing on another level and they're more transactional. And you probably are a sitting duck and you'll be sucked into the vortex. So if it feels like abuse and hurt, you don't deserve it, that's also the indicator that you need to look at what's going on.
So if we're experiencing the love bombing and it feels too good to be true, and I'm pausing right now and I'm thinking about what that feels like. I know exactly what that feels like. Can we talk about the 2 subsequent can we talk about the discard and can we talk about the Hoover? Because I feel like the love bombing, the discard, and the Hoover are the 3 that sort of get talked about the most in pop culture. And I know that you're a pop culture expert when it comes to all of this because of all of your years in television. So We know what the love bomb feels like. It feels too good to be true. It fits like a glove. They're our soulmate. They're our twin flame. We can't live without them. They can't live without us. Being near them feels like we're ingesting the most unbelievably amazing drug of all time. Now, conversely, what does the discard feel like, or the devaluation with the subsequent discard? What does the devaluing and the discard feel like?
So love bombing, I will say, how you described it was beautiful. It felt like the way my addicts described their first hit of crack cocaine. Okay, once they took the crack, and then they try to chase the dragon, chase that feeling forever and ever. So the love bombing, you're going to continue to chase. So what will happen then is you get valued in that love bombing. You get placed on a pedestal because that supply, they kind of need you big time. Well, once intimacy happens, and that's where I find in the clinical world, intimacy is the bomb. You usually become, I call the projection of the abusing parent. It's not even about you anymore. It's about the things I never said to dad or mom. And you become that. And so they put you on the pedestal and then they value you. But then all of a sudden you may be doing things that are good for you. You may be promoted at work. You may be taking the energy away from them. I call them energy vampires for a reason. And then they'll start discarding you and taking you off that. Or they'll start screaming at you or raging, or they'll be insulting you, or literally everything in that relationship is your problem, your fault. There's no accountability. There's no ownership. So you go into love bombing, you go into the pedestal, then you start being devalued. Once you go to devalue, well, they need you back and the hoovering begins. We're going to get you back somehow. You're now supply. You're not my 50-50 love and my connection. You're my supply. So we start hoovering, and that's what you said then. But once that mask falls and you start understanding really it, once you get under the tent of that tragic individual, okay, you find it out that there's nothing there, that there is a low self-esteem, there is the 4-year-old child, there is the object constancy issue. They can't let go and they can't even see you. They'll be jealous of anything you do. Once you get in there, then you are absolutely no help at all, and you'll be discarded. And that discard comes, and then you get the ghosting, and then you'll never get a text back, and you go, oh my God, but I loved you, but they're playing on a different set of rules here. They've already gone on probably to another supply. And you're sitting there and your whole life is gone, and you're in your mind, your life. Now, this is also a great moment to go look inside and really find who you are, that authentic person, that childhood sort of comfort level that you have is all about. It's taking the mask off of you as well through clinical work, through leaning into the complex trauma, to embracing yourself, to parenting yourself properly, that which you probably didn't get as a child.
Would you say that reparenting the self is a way that we can arm ourselves from stepping in tar?
Absolutely, Athena. In fact, because I testify in domestic cases, and so I always said, I see a man or a woman in the back of a courtroom saying, I love you to my child, right? But they're being charged with 3 felonies. And I'm going, whoa, this word love is really overused. Parenting to me, really parenting to me, is 3 things: is being fair, consistent, and available. That would make it it just takes one neurotic parent who can connect to their child, not to create the attachment disorder. It's when 2 aren't. And so fair, consistent, and available is what we need to be for ourselves. We need to reparent, like you just said, ourselves and become fair, consistent, available. We need to have grace and forgiveness for ourselves. We need to understand that progress is 3 steps forward and 2 backward, and start leaning in, and do it. Like Nike says, let's do it with complex PTSD as the core. Because I believe in what Gabor says. I think every addiction, no offense to the addiction model, I've run a lot of treatment centers. It's always been the disease model. I think they're all dissociative states of childhood trauma. Gabor said it right. Why wouldn't we escape from our complex trauma? So yes, I really believe that leaning in, reparenting ourselves is the key.
Wow. Would you say that coming to a place like Taranon is a great first step? So when someone goes to Taranon, and am I understanding correctly you said May 15th, is that correct? Or May 1st?
Actually, we're kicking out May 1st, Mental Health Awareness Month, but you're right. I know you're probably more accurate than I am. Now you're running 2 foundations, right? But we're probably going to, May 15th, we'll kick in the men's and women's meetings, and the first one will be our general meeting. But yes.
And they'll be given tools to learn how to reparent the self so that we can heal in such a way and become introspective and develop self-awareness and self-compassion, self-love, self-advocacy, so that we can be better equipped to go out into the world and attract and enjoy healthy relationships versus those toxic and abusive relationships.
Absolutely. I think we all need to take a break by shooting up relationships. And parental alienation is a huge thing. I understand that the toxic individual has to get to you somehow and win. You can see politicians and world leaders have to win. And they'll weaponize children and they'll weaponize other people, the flying monkeys. We forgot to talk about them. So as soon as you're in a relationship, yeah, they'll go after your friends. I remember years and years ago when I went through this, I had to get rid of all my friends on the other side because I took too much energy for me to try to deal with the gaslighting. By the way, the gaslighting here is the key, right? It's the word salad where you kind of reel people in. But I think Tar-Anon is the place to start because it's free, it's accessible. And we have 20 different topics we've chosen to run through and then repeat and run through. We have 12 steps, we have promises. And as I mentioned, we'll have Tar mentors, like sponsors who will help you through it. It's great to go to Oasis, don't get me wrong, but I do recognize reality and that certain people will be able to go and certain won't. But a lot of people sobered up in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous in the rooms, right? And it was the emotional regulation, which is the steps maybe, and is the co-regulation, which is the meetings where you have a new group of people, non-toxic, we hope, that are going towards the same direction, which is the co-regulated side. So I'm hoping against hope that Tar-Anon, as we clinically based it and spiritually based it, is that accessible point where we could start healing. But I really believe, and I'm going to say this loud and clear, that your services were the first place that I ever saw where it was really available for people to start long before Tar-Anon. And so we will incorporate as much as we can all the cool things that you're doing, trauma yoga and things like that in it. We'll do breath work we do now in the beginning, 478, and we'll leave with breath work. It is a different type of a program, a different type of a meeting, but it's based upon a lot what the CPTSD Foundation already has proven and shown everybody.
Oh, well, thank you. You're so kind. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Tar Dojo because this is the prevention arm of the Tar network, and I have a soft spot in my heart for prevention, obviously, because I feel like if we are able to get to these young parents, or as you called yourself, the AARP parents, which you're so funny. I've never heard it called that, but if we can reach parents while their children are either still in utero, that would be preferable, or early enough, early on, they can be equipped with the tools and the skills and the support necessary to know what to do when they experience a misattunement with their child. And in my experience, like when we're dealing from an early childhood trauma place, there's this perfect little baby, and this little baby, we're attuned to our child, we're attuned to their needs. And because we have to work and clean the house and, have jobs and do all of the adult things that we must do that are responsible, there's a misattunement, not intentional, but we're misattuned because we're not here attuned to the child. And when we have a misattunement, there's a dysregulation, which is natural. And the way that we can prevent attachment trauma is if we come in fully equipped with tools and support, knowing how to repair the misattunement and the dysregulation and to meet the needs of the child. And if that happens consistently throughout the first several years, like you said, in the first 10 years, then we won't have another generation of people that are trying to heal from attachment wounds. So I just, it's such a hope-giving message. Like what you're doing is, it's such a hope-giving message. And I'm grateful.
Thank you. We're grateful also when I listen to your groups and the things you do on YouTube, I always hear that you're very mindful of this, and therapy and psychology was not so mindful. I work with crack babies in Washington, D.C. and crack mothers, so people are addicted to crack. And, exactly in utero, we have no clue psychologically where the trauma comes from. We haven't even looked at that. But we also don't have much of a clue from 0 to 4. And every time we send somebody to therapy, psychoanalytic or psychotherapeutic, that's not trauma framed, listen, you can't even get to that 0 to 4. The amygdala, and it happens to brainstem and the amygdala, your executive functioning is not even developed. So you're dealing at such a deep level that you're 100% right. We don't know 0 to 4. Now, 4 to 8, maybe we start going into that. We have to have a trauma certified therapist, please, whatever. I know that therapists can, no offense to my field, we create learned helplessness, but don't go to anybody that's not trauma certified, period, or complex PTSD savvy, because I think we're wasting their time. I think we can reparent ourselves. And so, to your point, the TAR dojo for me is really the North Star for us, because I look at my daughter, I look at the kids of this world, and I think that we're detaching more and more neurologically. On my watch, it's been the internet. On their watch, it will be AI. And neurologically, we keep getting further and further out. We're seeing war. Nobody's listening. We're in tribalism. Hell, when I was in the network TV, there was only 3 or 4 networks, right? 6 million people. Now we have people on the couch who are dysregulating and detaching us. So the key, like Gabor says, we get screwed up in a relationship. We also heal through healthy relationships. So what I noticed was that we're teaching Lamaze method. We're teaching yoga. Mila, my co-founder, love that she just had a baby 2 days ago.
And oh my goodness, congratulations, Mila.
I will tell her. I've been calling him Irving for 9 months, but she changed the name to Victor because she wants victory for this cause. And she is very, very passionate with you and Matt. It's amazing. So, but I told her, I said exactly this. What are you learning? Well, I'm learning how to breathe. Well, that's great. Breath work is important. I'm learning yoga. Well, that's great. Is anybody teaching you how to deal with the attachment disorder? She, what do you mean? And I said, well, being fair, consistent, available, be the primary caregiver. The most important thing, I think, is to start where the child is at, not where you think they should be at. Parents always miss the mark, like us therapists do. We miss the mark. We start where we think the client should be at. We start where the child is at. So how do we parent somebody? Well, we should do it immediately, like you said. And so the TAR Dojo is going to be dedicated to parent programming. And hopefully we'll be able to try down here in South Florida. I've got 5 hospitals on their OB units. We're going to start and do pre-test, post-test, and try to do some metrics and scale it. When after Mental Health Awareness Month is done, come June the 1st, we'll be able to. I'm writing the program along with Beth Tyson, several real key complex PTSD savvy therapists. I'd love to get your engagement and your input because I know it's a passion of yours. But that to me is the North Star. How do we not create the Putins, the Hitlers, the Kim Jong-un? And I'm not just saying that. How do we not create these tragic people that end up don't want to be evil, but our lives have gone into the hell and damnation? And I think that starts immediately, like you said, parenting from get-go. If you know you're going to create Frankenstein, okay, if you want to be Dr. Frankenstein, have at it. But that Frankenstein's going to come back and eat you. So we want the attachment disorder to be front and center. This is how you do it. This is how you be fair, consistent, and available. This is how you connect to your child right there immediately. So that's the TAR Dojo for parenting. Coming to a hospital near you, we hope.
I love this. Oh my goodness. So I don't know if you read this book. I'm trying to think of the author's name now. The book is called The Strange Situation, and it's based on the British philosopher Bowlby and then the subsequent work of Mary Ainsworth. So there's Bowlby and Ainsworth, all their peer-reviewed research on attachment theory, and it's written in such almost like a memoir slash self-help slash novel. Like it's a fascinating book. Now I'm going to have to make sure that we can link it wherever this interview is going to be. But it's an excellent book, and I think it's so important to keep in mind attachment theory, right? When they're contemplating the type of parent they're going to be to this precious little human, this future adult that will change the world.
Well, I'm so with you. And listen, as long as you have Bowlby, anybody can Google him. He is the father of if you will, of the attachment theory. I totally agree with you. So psychology, I'm old school, right? I'm a Jungian trained therapist, started many years ago. God loved Rogers and Freud and Jung and Skinner. They were our theorists, and we built ourselves on their back. And Freud was right. Again, I always consider us awareness. I consider the CPTSD Foundation as transformation. And I see the third part of the psychological journey as self-love. So it's awareness, transformation, and self-love. Patients, I think that the trauma model allows us to become sort of our new trauma therapist for ourselves. That DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which was self-professed, Dr. Marshall Linehan said she actually had the cluster B and she created DBT. But as we also know, not many people will own the fact that I need to get into help for DBT. So we used it for attachment issues across the spectrum. Well, we should. I think it's neuroplasticity and the ability to reparent our minds and to go back and deal with that tattooed brain that felt so comfortable in that toxic relationship and now become authentic. I guess I'll let you ask the last questions here, but the deal is if your listeners or viewers are thinking that sitting on a mountain in Tibet and having that spiritual awakening is the end game, I've found out it's not through my own personal recovery from complex PTSD. I find out it's authenticity. It's being able to peel the layers off of us like an onion, and you cry at every level. We don't even know if we hit the authentic mark in this lifetime, because I think all paths lead to the righteous, and I have no clue. But if we're not heading towards authenticity and not worrying about changing the person in front of us, but being the most honest true person for ourselves in the moment with truth, authenticity, and values. I always say values are the garlic and the crucifix to the attachment disordered person. So stay with your values. But if we're not doing that, then we're missing the boat. So the end game is, how do we do that and not be responsible for the world or the other person's issues? Tell them to call their therapist if they have a problem. But the path is complex PTSD is, for me, it's how do I become real in the moment? And I guess in my recovery, you go through hell, you lean into the fog of war, but I don't think I've ever felt more, grounded. And coming from a person who wanted to, get rid of myself, don't get me wrong, y'all, I'm a therapist, but it was a bad up and down issue when you get into terrible relationships. But I think it happened, like I wrote the book, Take Your Oxygen First, trying to get caregivers to take care of their loved one. I said, just think when you're burned out to look at yourself and start taking your oxygen first. And now this has happened to me to look at myself, help deal with A, my baby, the foundation, B, my baby who I've got, and most importantly, I think the baby inside of me that really needed the attention more than anybody.
Yeah, I love that there's such a focus on getting to know the self and reparenting the self and healing the self. And it really is possible. I think it feels like such a long journey, and it feels so painful at times, and it can feel so lonely. But alongside that long journey that feels so lonely, you are equipping people with the tools they need and providing the treatment they need and providing the support they need. So if they have the awareness, if they have the self-awareness that this is something they need, then they can find you. And if it resonates, go into that place and find you at you said originally that you sort of launched this in the rooms at intherooms.com, but on May 1st, everyone can go to tarnetwork.org and find the support that they need. And then hopefully right around the 15th during Mental Health Awareness Month, the men's groups, the women's groups, and then eventually Tar Dojo, and then of course Oasis right there, the treatment center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
So true, and I'm looking forward to us working closer together because I see us as part of a continuum of care. And I think that when we discharge patients, whether they're from Oasis or whether we come out or working in tandem, we can't get enough healing, that your services at the CPTSD Foundation are vital. They're not mutually exclusive. When I cut my meetings on Mondays, when people say I'm in AA or NF, that's fabulous. This is supposed to be an adjunct. This should be part of it. And so it was, we will, when we do virtual, we also have on the plan virtual IOP and virtual partial eventually, but we see the discharge plan is working with you and Matt and the whole team at the CPTSD Foundation in your services and having our care managers making sure this is included. So yes, I think Tarnon is what we all need it. I need it. The world needs it. But I think everybody needs also to go to the CPTSD Foundation, become a part, even though I know you don't want me to to say that it's been great for myself. I've been a member for years now with you all, and I've been advisory board. I love that commercial. I'm not just the president. I'm also a member, right? But really,
A hair
what you
club
guys,
for men.
a hair club for men. That's right. But it's really us together. It's a collective thing. It is awareness, transformation, and self-love. So we're really happy to be on the journey with you all. And the beauty, and I'll leave it like this. You no longer have to create the learned helplessness. You no longer have to come see me on a Thursday at 3 o'clock, because I think what I'll do is stir up the clinical stew. And then, I mean, I want everybody in therapy. I want somebody with trauma certified therapists to shadow and give them energy and coach them. But don't be dependent upon me as a therapist. Now you can be your own trauma therapist. Like the services you have, the services in Tarnon, you can actually write your treatment plan and be okay, 3 steps forward, 2 back, have a TAR mentor, have somebody teaching your courses there involved. And the beauty of this is move on to recovery and not be concerned about what that means. There's no real end game with that. Just be on the path. And when you do that reparenting path and this journey, I can tell you there is a wonderful pot of gold spiritually, if you will, spiritually at the end of this rainbow. And I'm just starting to see glimpses of it. And just but it empowers me every day. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend time with you and to interview you and to spread this message that you have. I want everyone to be able to find you and to join you and Mila over on Instagram. Do you want to tell everybody how they can find you and join your community on Instagram?
Sure, I would love to. Instagram is just, I'm terrible at this. I have to call my daughter, but I think it's hashtag TAR network, all one word, TAR network. Join us. We're growing like a weed, which is good and bad, but we obviously resonate. It's animation and it's cool stories, and we're doing emotional regulation techniques. And we have creators and we give them ideas. Join us also, if you will, at tarnetwork.org and become a part of this movement. Complex PTSD Foundation is just right next to us, and we want to make sure it's always front and center. Also, as a transformative North Star, go to TARTales, TARTales.org. We kicked that off, oddly enough, during the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and all of a sudden that went nuts with stories from people around the world who are providing us that. And at the end, all else fails, go to drjamie.com, drjamie.com, and you'll find everything I hope leads to what we hope is the breaking, like you said before, of the intergenerational trauma, which is literally what we all can be responsible for. Like Gandhi says, let peace begin with me. So thank you for this time too, Athena. It's been amazing.
You're so welcome. Bye, everybody.